Hey, this is Joy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I've got two cards to share with you using the layering sunflower dies from Scrappy Tails Crafts. Now this die set comes with a solid piece, an intricate piece, and then one in the middle. I opted not to use the solid piece because I'm going to make flowers that are 3D that are kind of curved and whatnot, so I'm shaping them. So I did die cut each of the three flowers 6 times. I ultimately didn't need that many, but I wanted to be on the safe side because I wasn't sure exactly what my designs were going to be. Now I cut these using smooth cardstock so that I could color it with Copics. This requires absolutely zero Copic skills, and I'm not joking. So I started out by taking the centerpieces of the sunflower and putting on an E35 Copic marker, and then I dotted on a E37 and a 39, creating the stamen. Next I come in with a YG61, 63, and a 67, coloring in the leaves. Now the 61 was the solid, and you're going to see that I got some fingerprints on my leaves, and it ultimately does not make a difference. So using the 6-7, I just kind of traced the veins of the leaves and I made them very, very sloppy. Then I blended that in with the YG63, leaving just an outside outline of the lighter color. Now I am coming in with the bottom layer of each of the sunflowers, and I am using a Y28 Copic, and I am just coloring in a portion of the center, and I am drawing in very sloppy lines along the petals. And again, like I said, this really does not require any type of coloring skills. It just requires you to put down sloppy colors, and you could use any alcohol marker for this technique. Now I do recommend the alcohol markers because I am going to add water later on, but let's continue with this coloring. I followed that with a Y23 and a 21, and you're going to see how dirty these are. This is where the scary part comes in. I lay these face down, and using a distress sprayer I moisten all of the layers. And then I proceed to pick them up and I crumple them up in my hand. And what this does is create some dimension and some wrinkles like a flower would have. Now I do bring in my McGillis stylus pen and pads. And what I'm doing is I'm misting the back side of the flower again. And using a medium stylus, I am working the back portions of the flower, and I am curling those flower petals, and I do that by just kind of rubbing the stylus along each petal long ways, and that gets them to curl on it. And what the reason I use the water is because that softens the fibers of the paper, making it more pliable. Now you have to be careful with the amount of water. I only recommend like 1 or 2 spritzes. Otherwise, you're going to get your paper to warp, like bubble up, because it's got multiple layers in it, and it's going to separate. After I do the back side of the flower, I then come in and I burnish the center of the flower down, kind of causing an indentation, making the flower cup, if that makes sense. I do repeat this on every one of the layers of the sunflower. So what I used was the most intricate layer of the sunflower, which is the top, and then I used the center one, or the middle sized one, which is a little bit less intricate than that, but it's not solid and it's slightly larger, and that's going to create all the different layers. I do the exact same thing with the leaves. I moisten the back of that, and using my stylus, I burnish that and I curl it back and forth, and I make sure I get a really nice bend on that, and then I flip it over to the front and I push down on the portion that would be connected to the stem. Now I have included a couple of these in here just so that you can see it more than once. And you're also going to see where the where Sabrina had the scores and the cut lines. Those separate, and I'm fine with that. I actually prefer it. Another technique I do is I fold that center crease and I fold it out, and that way I get even more dimension. Now I colored 1 orange and 2 purple flowers with the exact same technique. But do you ever look at some of your dies and say, I wonder what else I could do with it? I happen to love mums. And if you look at the sunflower, if you cut each of those petals in half and you separate it almost down to the very center of the flower, you're eventually going to get a petal that fans out with much spikier looking petals, for lack of better words, and you're going to create what looks kind of like a mum. So I do the exact same thing, and there's no magic involved. I am using my stylus, and I'm making sure to get a really nice curl on these leaves, or I'm sorry, on these petals. And at times I even hold a portion of them because they're so intricate. That way I get a better pressure. So I anchor one with like my index of my left hand, and I continue to use my stylus. And then once that's curled up, I go in the center. Now sometimes you'll notice that the petals kind of bend backwards on each other. I do kind of pull those out. Now look at how spiky these things are starting to become. It doesn't even look like the same flower petal. And I love that. That is actually what I was going for. So I colored the orange with a YR12, a 15, and an 18. And I'm letting you know that because I know somebody's going to ask. Again, I used the same sloppy technique that I used for coloring the yellow sunflowers, because once you start crumpling the flowers and start molding them, and then you layer all the different pieces together, you actually don't see it. You want the different variations to be striking, so that you notice that. Now you'll see that I cut off one of the petals on accident. You don't even see that in the final product, so just keep going. I say that with every project that I do. Keep going, don't stop. You're going to be able to pull it out of the fire if you have it. In this case, I don't feel like I had fire, but I am telling you that. Now, for the purple flowers, I do 2 of those. I colored that with a V as in Victor, 9195, and a 99. I also bring in my Aztec Stencil from Scrappy Tails and some pigment ink, white pigment ink, and I stenciled that onto a 3.5 by 8.5 piece of cardstock. I do end up cutting that down to about 2 inches so that it creates a stripe on my slimline card that I am creating, and I cut that down off screen, but I wanted you to be aware. And you're also going to see on my blending brush, I actually have the word white written on that. That is because I never want to use anything but a white pigment on that, because you're not going to recover it. I also use a sentiment from the Sunflower stamp set, and I emboss that onto an actual slimline card base. I then apply the strip of the Aztec stenciling onto the card base, and this is where I start to construct my flowers. I use hot glue for this. You could use regular glue like Barely Art or Art Glitter Glue. I like the dimension and the finality that a glue gun provides, so that's what I use. But again, if you're not comfortable with that, you don't have to. I make sure that I stagger my petals because I am using the same petal, the same flower like petals twice. So I make sure I stagger those, and as that hot glue is drying, I bend the petals of the top layer up, and I also use my stylus and I push down that center. Basically, I am molding that until that glue hardens and becomes permanent, and I like that. Then I use that, what I call, looks like the chocolate chip cookie of the stamen, and I put some hot glue down on there. And again, because that's a cupped flower now, that's not going to fit 100% in there. So I wanted to use the hot glue so that I would have dimension and also that I could push it down and it would hold. And right now it's not gorgeous, but it will be. I then used the black center, and with some Barely Art glue, I put down the center of that flower. And I repeat this process for all 3 flowers, and I think that they turned out beautiful. And you'll have to let me know what you think of this. If you like this card so far, I would love it if you would leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up, even consider subscribing, because all of those things create an algorithm in YouTube and get my videos shown, and I am trying to grow my channel, so I would really appreciate that. I am now gluing the flowers onto my slimline card, and the larger of the flowers I put in the center, and then the 2 smaller are on each side of that. I also use hot glue to put down the leaves. Now I only put the hot glue on the very innermost portion of the leaf. That way I have a 3D card. Of course, you can either send this in a plastic box. I get that at clear bags, or you can put it in a padded envelope. They will hold up, or you could hand deliver it, which is what I plan to do. Now for those smaller leaves, I actually took a leaf and cut it in half to create those outside leaves. Now I'm moving on to my second card, which is going to become the mum. For the purple flower, I start by gluing in the brown portion of the stamen because I felt like maybe I might get a better dimension on this. And again, I use my hot glue and my stylus, and I really cup that flower and I hold that in place. I am fluffing up the petals of the flower, and you're going to see that now we've got double the amount of petals, and this now, instead of being a sunflower, and with the change of color, it now looks like a mum. And I am going to repeat this for the orange and the second purple one. For the orange one, I fiddled with that a little bit longer, and I think it's because I didn't like my placement. But ultimately, once I really cup that and hold that in place, I do get a very nice flower. And then here I am working on the purple, and I went back to my original technique, and I put the stamen in next, and you can see that the stamen was sticking to my finger, and I had to play with the strings of the glue. So a little tip, if you're dealing with hot glue, you've got all of those strings that kind of pull and they're kind of spidery. Once you have everything glued the way you want it, and I'm talking about onto the card, you can take a heat gun and just zap it real fast, and all those strings will disappear. I learned that when I was wreath making years ago, and that was a life-changing technique. Now, I am using my Barely Art glue, which is a wet glue, and I am stippling that onto the center of all of the flowers. And I'm doing that because I want to apply glitter. I am using a fine glitter from, I think it's Fairy Hugs. It's a copper penny, I think. And that's only going to adhere to the stippled areas of the glue. And you're going to see I'm just kind of flipping that just to get all the glitter off. But ultimately, I end up with a really super pretty, shiny center of the flower. I did emboss a piece of peacock colored cardstock, and I adhered that to an A2 card base. And then using a piece of vellum, I then embossed a sentiment from that sunflower stamp set from Scrappy Tails. And the key to embossing vellum, one is use a heavyweight vellum, and two, keep your gun moving. If you leave it sitting there, it's going to warp, so you've got to keep it moving. And then when you adhere vellum, you need to go where your solid part of your stamping is. So I would only adhere that in the center, where that deep writing is, like where the sunshine is. Now I am constructing my layout, and I added some wet glue there in the corner, and I am adhering the orange. And the reason I use the orange is because I only have one of those flowers, so I wanted that to be center. And again, I am fluffing the petals just to get a really nice fluffy flower. And then I ultimately end up moving on with hot glue, and I put down the 2 purple flowers, kind of hugging that bottom left-hand corner. I'm sorry that my head gets in the way, but sometimes you really have to get in there to see what you're doing. And now, using the same technique with the leaves, I am applying that to the edge of only to the innermost edge of the leaf. And then I'm gluing that onto the bottom of the flower. And I originally was only going to go with 1 leaf per flower, but I really thought that the purple one on the end needed 2 leaves. And then that bottom left-hand corner seemed a little sparse to me, so I added another flower. So again, I would really appreciate it if you would like, comment, and subscribe. Here are some last looks at my cards. And until next time, friends, keep crafting. Be blessed. Bye-bye.